twin suns hung low above Calder's Bay when Darius finally gave Kenny his answer. The city below them glowed peacefully along the rivers while colony transports moved slowly across the night skies, carrying settlers toward their new lives on Eidolon Reach. Kenny and his uncle still sat overlooking the capital from the high terrace above the water. Neither had moved for several minutes after Kenny asked him to stay, to leave House Rain behind, to help build something new. Darius finally exhaled slowly through his nose, then smiled. "All right." Kenny looked toward him immediately. The older man nodded once. "I will help you." The mountain winds rolled softly around them, not dramatic, not explosive, just certain. For the first time since winning Eclipse, something inside Kenny actually settled slightly. Darius noticed it immediately. The uncle leaned back against the overlook railing. But Kenny already expected conditions. "I cannot disappear overnight." The older man gestured vaguely upward toward the stars. "House Rain already suspects too much." Kenny nodded once. "You need to go back. Temporarily." Darius looked out across Calder's Bay while the city lights reflected across the rivers below. "If I stay here immediately after our meeting, they will panic." A faint smirk crossed his face. "And frankly, your grandfather panicking usually results in explosions." Kenny almost smiled slightly. Darius continued. "I return home." He tapped the railing softly. "I act normal." Another tap, and then eventually. He glanced toward Kenny. "I leave for good." The younger man remained silent for several seconds, then finally asked the question, sitting quietly beneath everything else. "Why?" Darius looked genuinely confused for a moment. "Why what? Why is this so easy for you?" The night winds moved gently through the overlook while the city carried on peacefully below them. Kenny studied his uncle carefully. "You are walking away from your family." Darius remained quiet, then finally laughed softly to himself. Not bitter, sad, brother. He looked out toward the glowing colony city. "I never had a son or daughter." Kenny listened silently. "And your father never truly wanted one." The older man shook his head slowly. "I do not like wasting rain during an emotional family drought." That answer hit harder than Kenny expected, because underneath the humor, it was honest. Darius finally looked directly toward him. "You are the first person in this bloodline in decades who actually wants to build something better instead of simply controlling it." The floating dagger beside Kenny rotated lazily through the night air. Darius smiled faintly at it, and honestly, a pause. "Your mother would have chosen you too." Silence settled softly between them after that. Warm silence, family silence. Something Kenny barely recognized anymore. The next morning, the colony transport departed from the mountain clearing outside Kenny's cave, while mist rolled across the forests beneath dawn sunlight. Darius stood near the boarding ramp, looking calmer than when he arrived, like finally making a decision had removed a weight from him. Kenny stood nearby with his hands in his jacket pockets, while Risol rested comfortably across his shoulders. The mist runner chirped softly toward Darius before phasing briefly through the older man's arm. Darius blinked once. "I still hate how they do that." Kenny almost smiled again. The older man stepped toward him one final time before boarding. "Be careful." Kenny nodded once. "You too." Darius looked toward the mountains surrounding the cave. "You built something good here." A pause. "Do not let House Rain poison it." Then without another word, he boarded the shuttle. The ship slowly lifted into the morning skies before disappearing beyond the clouds above Eidolon Reach. Kenny remained watching long after it vanished, until another transport appeared climbing through the valley. Smaller, civilian. Risol chirped curiously from Kenny's shoulder. The second ship landed smoothly near the cave entrance before two formally dressed figures stepped out onto the stone platform. A man and a woman, both wearing the silver and blue colonial crest of Eidolon Reach. Kenny recognized them immediately, the elected capital leaders, Governor Elian Ward of Calder's Bay, Governor Mira Saul of Nova Reach. The governors approached respectfully, not fearfully. That difference still mattered. Mira smiled warmly. "Champion." Kenny nodded slightly. "Governors." Elian glanced around the mountain cliffs with visible admiration. "You really do prefer isolation." Risol chirped loudly from Kenny's shoulder. The governor jumped slightly. An apparently magical wildlife. Kenny gestured toward the cave entrance. "Come inside." The governors followed him into the mountain home while sunlight streamed through the open balcony overlooking endless forests below. Mira immediately stepped toward the view. I still cannot believe this world is real sometimes. Elian activated a holographic tablet calmly. We actually came regarding colony growth. Kenny sat near the stone table while Rissel climbed lazily onto the back of his chair. The governor expanded the population projections. Current global population 1, 8 million, projected 3-month increase, 3, 9 million. Kenny looked up slightly. Mira folded her hands together. The migration requests are becoming overwhelming. Elian nodded once. People want to come here. The holographic displays expanded further, showing transport queues stretching across multiple systems. Frontier workers, families, independent guilds, veterans, scientists, all requesting settlement rights. Myra looked directly toward Kenny. We are formally requesting authorization to import another 2 million settlers over the next migration cycle. The cave quieted briefly. Kenny studied the projections carefully. The population growth looked explosive already, fast enough to become dangerous if poorly managed. Elian seemed to notice the concern immediately. We can support it. Additional infrastructure plans appeared. Expanded agriculture, water purification systems, new housing districts. The colony foundations are stable. Mira smiled softly. And the people trust your leadership. Kenny remained silent for several moments, then finally nodded once, approved. Both governors visibly relaxed. Mira laughed softly. Thank gods. Elian deactivated the projections. There is one more matter. Kenny looked toward him. The governor smiled faintly. The people are holding a ceremony tonight. Rissel chirped suspiciously. Kenny narrowed his eyes slightly. What kind of ceremony? Mira folded her arms proudly. The kind celebrating the man who gave millions of people a second chance. 3 hours later, Calder's Bay looked alive. The river city glowed beneath hanging lanterns while settlers crowded the streets surrounding the central plaza. Music drifted between buildings. Children ran through markets carrying small reaper banners. Food stalls lined the bridges and waterfronts. And everywhere Kenny looked, people smiled when they saw him. Not because they feared him, because they were genuinely happy he existed. That still unsettled him slightly. Pines eventually appeared pushing through the crowd carrying 2 drinks, mate. Kenny looked toward him. You accidentally became beloved. I noticed. Pines handed him one of the drinks. The baker lady near the eastern docks called you the guardian of Reach earlier. Kenny looked mildly horrified. Pines laughed loudly. I know. It is fantastic. The ceremony platform stood near the riverfront, surrounded by thousands of settlers beneath glowing lights and banners. Governor Mira eventually stepped forward, addressing the crowd. People of Eidolon Reach. The cheering exploded immediately. She smiled warmly. 1 month ago, this world belonged to nobody. The crowd quieted again. Today, she gestured toward the city around them. .it belongs to all of us. More cheers. Mira looked toward Kenny standing near the front of the platform. But none of this exists without one man. The settlers erupted again. Pines leaned closer, whispering, You should practice heroic waving. Kenny ignored him completely. Governor Elian stepped forward carrying a small silver object, an official colonial emblem, forged from the first refined metals mined on Eidolon Reach itself. The governor held it toward Kenny proudly. On behalf of the first citizens of Eidolon Reach. A pause. We recognize Kenny Rain not simply as champion of Eclipse. The crowd went completely silent. But as founder of Reach. The plaza exploded into applause so loud it echoed across the rivers and mountains beyond the city. Kenny accepted the emblem slowly while thousands of settlers cheered beneath the twin suns of his world. And somewhere deep beneath all the noise, for the first time in his entire life, he finally felt like he belonged somewhere.